So thanks everybody for coming to our webinar today. This is part of the Different by Design series. This is session 3, Leading Better, Strategies for Leaders and Managers with Neurodiverse Team Members. I have on as a guest today, we have Samantha Kelly, who is joining us for like a little interview and discussion around this topic. Samantha, do you want to go ahead and give us some of your background?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, Salem. I really appreciate it. Hi, everybody. My name is Samantha Kelly. I go by Sammy by my friends. I count everybody here now as a friend, so you may call me Sammy. I am a neurodivergent consultant and a public speaker. I mean neurodivergent in two ways. I am neurodivergent, and also I speak to the neurodivergent experience, trying to gain understanding, empathy, and accessibility for neurodivergent people in the workplace. I'm the founder of Beyond Neurodiversity, an organization that helps other organizations, I should say, create that level of accessibility and understanding through training, coaching, and development. I think it'll come out through our conversation. I love my job. So I'm having a great time and I'm really happy to be here today.
I'm constantly running into that when I'm trying to like write copy and like headlines for this, or I'll be like, this is for neurodiverse professionals. And I'm like, are people going to think I mean professionals in the neurodiverse space
Right.
or professionals who are neurodiverse? Because I mean both, but
Yeah.
we really mean professionals who are, but I
Mhm.
digress. Or I guess you're both, right, Sam?
I'm both. Yeah.
So just to cover real quick, what is this series for? So this is an educational space for neurodiverse professionals, students, and founders to come together as a community to grow with professional and personal development from leading experts such as we have today. And we're going to learn how to turn our differences into strengths together. I am Salem Shepard. I'm the founder of Mountaineer Creative Studio. I'm the host of this series. I'm an entrepreneur, an engineer, and an artist. I play the guitar a little bit, and I'm a Taurus. Today we have Samantha Kelly on with us, founder of Beyond Neurodiversity. She's an advocate, speaker, and coach. As you heard a second ago, I got this out of order a little bit, but that's fine. I like to cover the values that we use in this series. So this is a place for community engagement. Everybody's voice is welcome. This is very much like a pro audience engagement space. So everybody feel free to chime in. This is a safe space for growth and collaboration. This is not a place for judgment. This is a place where we can grow at our own pace. Growing can be painful. Not every piece of advice is meant for everybody at the current point that they're at in their journey. And it can be very difficult and painful to share. There's a lot of like vulnerability that comes into that. So take away from this whatever you want. Kind of grow in the ways that fit where you're at in your journey currently. And I just hope you take something positive away from these sessions. And then finally, a big part of this is to learn from each other. We have to learn from each other's experiences. As neurodiverse people, we navigate the world in a unique way, and it can be really, really valuable and encouraging to learn from the experiences of other neurodiverse people in particular. It's really easy to grow up going like, oh, nobody gets like the way I navigate and understand the world. And then you meet other neurodiverse people and it's like, oh my God, these are people who like have had the same experiences as me. Wow, I thought I was the problem. So today's session, leading better strategies for leaders and managers with neurodiverse team members. And we're going to have an interview and discussion with Samantha. So let's go ahead and jump into it since we're about 5 minutes into the meeting time. Excuse me. So Samantha, what drew you to neurodiversity advocacy work?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we were talking right before the webinar kicked off, and we were sharing stories, and I shared I am a late diagnosed neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I have bipolar disorder, as well as I'm exploring some other potential diagnoses that I'm kind of wondering what's going on there. And it was being diagnosed in my late 20s that really opened my eyes to the fact that I think you said it really well, honestly, Salem, that like you think you're the problem. You spend your whole life thinking like I'm the problem. I need to work harder. I need to push more. I need to be better. When in reality, you're dealing with a brain that is just beautifully crafted in a different way. And it doesn't mean that you have to do any of those things. It means that you need to work within your own strengths and meet your own challenges. And so that lesson at 27 really opened my eyes to saying, oh my gosh, if I felt so alone, if I felt so different, and there were other people going through the same experience, not same exactly, right? But maybe could resonate with those feelings or understood what I might be going through. Why are we not having this conversation? And in a second vein as well, I was working for an HR firm, and I had the most phenomenal boss who had neurodivergence in her family, and I had a team who was also familiar with it, and the genuine support and acceptance that I received after my diagnosis, even before my diagnosis, when I was, let's call myself maybe difficult a little bit because I was, emotionally dysregulated, figuring out what was going on, struggling with these challenges. I began to realize how privileged I was to have this access to a phenomenal team and a supportive system. And not a lot of people had that. And as you may know, many neurodivergent individuals experience a deep sense of justice. And that sense of justice just told me, like, if I was lucky enough to have it, everybody should. And so that ultimately it drew me into it. I began to speak. I began to host at conferences, and the number of people who came up to me expressing that they finally felt seen was mind blowing to me,
Aw.
and also concerning. Nobody should go through this alone. Nobody should feel like it's just themselves. So, yeah, that sense of justice kind of gave me a kick in the rear end and said, "You've got stuff to do."
Absolutely. I that could be something that's difficult to manage. It's like,
Yeah.
um, especially, just all the crazy stuff going on in the world these days, having that sense of like, this isn't fair, this isn't right, and like you kind of just have to learn to live with that on some level. Because I mean, you can manage stuff, you can control things within your own sphere
Mhm.
potentially, but just to like look at things happening and be like, the way the world works is fundamentally wrong, and there's nothing I can do about that. And for me, that always kind of that feeling always led me to be like, I must be wrong about the way I must not
Mm.
understand because this seems unfair and like uncool and wrong. Whereas these days, I'm like, no, this is unfair and uncool and wrong. I just have to
Yeah.
live with that.
Yeah,
Um,
that's not fair for you to experience that internalized stigma, right? Like what you feel is valid and should be explored.
I like what you said about our brains being like beautifully crafted, but like built for something different, like
Hmm.
differently. Because I that's always been something that stuck out so strongly to me, especially in like leading and managing neurodiverse people, is like every neurodiverse person has like can be like so exceptional and do so well and create so much value like in their lane, in their space, like when they're accommodated and like structured around correctly and pointed in the right direction. And I mean, everyone needs those things. It's just that when you're a neurotypical person, that happens for you automatically because that's like what
Yeah.
all society is set up to do. Um, there's a really fascinating, I don't know whether to call it a hypothesis or a theory, it's just something I've read about, but there's this idea that if you were to look at like, caveman, like Neolithic, ancient prehistory humans, that neurodiverse people and that kind of like natural tribal setup served an incredibly important role where you'd be like, this person's naturally a night owl. They want to be awake at night. That's because that person would be like the night watchman of the tribe and would protect the tribe. Or like this person has autism. They really want to sit and like fiddle with stuff all day. Like that's probably the person who invented the bow and arrow or the spear or the wheel. Like, um, I always tell people that like it's people who are different who change the world, and like you kind of have to imagine that a lot of these people who invented like world-changing inventions and stuff that like made humanity what it is today were probably neurodiverse because that's like by definition they had to be different, right? So
Absolutely.
let's go on to the next question. That's something that always deeply fascinates me, that idea of like how we would fit into like prehistoric humanity.
Yeah.
Um, so what is the gap between companies or people or leaders who say they're ND inclusive and people who are actually actualizing that support and really doing it, not just like giving lip service to it?
Yeah, this is I don't mean to say a hard one as in it's a difficult question to answer. It's a hard one because it is the reality in many spaces. Like it's wonderful to to talk the talk, right? But walking the walk might look like recognizing that not everybody operates the same way and that we have to be incredibly individualized in our management techniques and in the way that we see people, which I'm not saying is easy. It takes a ton of energy, but to be able to recognize that and genuinely ask the questions. I look at inclusivity as the actions that you're taking. So, are you asking people what their preferences are and what their needs are? Are you creating a clear and easy to accessibility and accommodations request? You know, is that a simple like, hey, just schedule a meeting and talk to the person and we'll work with you? Or is it, do you have to have documentation? Do you have to go get a doctor's appointment? Do you have to worry about your insurance? So on and so forth. Um, the gap is talking the talk. Give me like 30 seconds. I've only had one cup of coffee and I got so excited by this darn question. The gap really is what barriers do you keep in place? Like, are you ultimately inclusive by removing as many barriers and asking people and including people in the conversation? Or are you just saying we're neuro inclusive because we have fidgets at our desks?
Right.
Very different experience.
I can say also there's like it's kind of a thing where you have to have a balance and a sweet spot
Hmm.
because I will say in my experience there it just like as someone leading our neurodiverse people there's such a thing as like in a sense too much support or too much accommodation because like for some people especially like a lot of neurodiverse people struggle with like self-worth and self-value issues like deeply tied to motivation like people who have rejection sensitive dysphoria, people who have like executive function issues. If you don't give them like enough room to feel like they're proving themselves, enough room to feel like they're making their own decisions, like I think there were times when I was trying to like remove all stress and remove all like you know deadlines or like all the things that like kind of give you that work pressure that like makes you work hard and that just
Yeah.
did not work that if that just like create I feel like it kind of created a sense of like codependency actually
Yeah. Yeah,
so
it's you really do have to understand the person itself. There is a fantastic book called Creating Cultures of Neuroinclusion. It's by Pasha Marlowe. Um, and in the book, they talk about the fact that you really have to stick with the ATP principle. Ask the person because you need to know what challenges them, what drives them, what keeps them moving. You also need to know what barriers are in their way and what is the difference between a barrier, like truly something you're going to run up against, it's going to be in your way, and a challenge. A
yeah
challenge can keep us moving. A
you got to
barrier can stop that movement. So
I am
we
like absolutely like you got to challenge. I think as neurodiverse people especially
yeah.
need challenge, but like the right type of challenge. Like I'm like personally like if I'm not challenged, I'm so bored. I'm so
Yeah.
checked out. Like I need something that's like making me like push and grow. And
What's
anyway,
what's a mentally stimulating challenge and what's an emotionally dysregulating challenge?
that's a great way to put it. Let's move on to the next question. So what do you think is the biggest, we might have just already gotten into this, but what do you think is the biggest mistake that well-meaning managers make when trying to provide accommodation and inclusivity?
Yeah, I mean you gave a great example, removing all barriers and making it almost coddling, right? We do need some challenge. Everybody needs a little bit of stress, a little bit of challenge to keep us moving. Um, I how do I phrase this politely? I think a well-meaning mistake that many people make, just not just managers, is that they see or hear a diagnosis and they immediately go to, oh, well, you must A, B, or C. you must not be able to do this. You must not be able to do X, Y, or Z. No, where each neurodivergent person is um, complex and layered, just as the neurotypical, right? And so we have things that we can really excel at, things that we maybe struggle at. We may not fit into the stereotype of what ADHD or autism looks like. So it's truly, yes, unique. Thank you, Bana. Um, it's truly, you really got to know the person in and of themselves, and attaching like a one size fits all approach, or not understanding who the person is in front of you is I think a mistake, even if you mean the best.
That's a really good way to put it. It needs to be, it's like it's to that person specifically.
Yeah. Hmm.
Something that I have felt like I've encountered is like I feel like I see a lot of like I don't really believe in obviously I'm not like a psychologist or whatever, but I feel like I don't really believe in like normal or like neurotypical. Like I feel like neurotypical is like also a spectrum and it can be this really complicated thing of like, is this person not neurodivergent or have they just learned to mask really well? And honestly, what's the difference between those things? Like, and I feel like there's this like weird gray area where it's like you'll see people who are probably neurodiverse, but like don't acknowledge it and don't identify with it and just have like unhealthy coping mechanisms. I mean, I
Yes,
feel like I used to be like that.
me
Um,
too.
I
The
kind of feel like,
definition, oh,
sorry,
sorry. The definition I give in any of the presentations that I use is that neurotypical is defined by society's definition of normal. That is a really messed up definition because we're
and thank
talking
you for
about
the topic.
society and then we're talking about normal. So you boil it down, it's really the most common neurological development pattern in population statistics. But that means that that is going to ebb and flow. Like the more we know about neurodivergence, the smaller the average is going to be for the neurotypical. And it's not a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It just is. We're just learning more.
Really good point. I wanted to point out, Bana had said in the chat earlier in our conversation that she believes that the world cannot run without neurodivergent people. I completely agree. I mean, I'm an engineer, so like, I've worked with a lot of other I feel like I've mostly worked with other neurodivergent people, but like, yeah, if you wanted to have like a company without neurodivergent people, like, okay, no programmers for you. You might not get any accountants. I don't know. I've known a lot of people who were like mechanics and stuff who were like
Yeah.
clearly neurodivergent. Like, I feel like I feel like there's probably massively high rates of undiagnosed people. Like, I feel like the percentage of people who are neurodiverse is probably a lot higher than we think it is, especially
Mm.
because like there's like shame and stigma attached to it if people know about it at all. And
Yeah.
before the call started, we were talking about how in a lot of like older generations and stuff, it was like not something you talked about.
Yeah.
Um, oops. Oh yeah, I already went here. Uh, again, I feel like we actually already kind of answered this question. Do we want to skip this one?
Wait, yeah, sure, we can.
Okay, yeah. This is interesting, actually, and this ties into what we were just talking about. So, if someone hasn't disclosed or maybe isn't even themselves aware, how would you approach that if you were a manager and you're like, I think my employee has ADHD. How do I talk to them about that so I can then accommodate them better?
Right, right. We actually in a talk I gave yesterday, this was a question that came up.
Oh, cool.
So we as managers, as leaders, as business people, right? You cannot, by law, walk up to somebody and say, like, hey, are you disabled? Hey, do you have ADHD? Hey, are you autistic? Like, no, we can't do that. Please don't. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a medical professional, but I highly recommend that you don't do that. Um, so I always recommend using not general questions, but broader questions that can apply to anybody, whether they're neurodivergent or neurotypical.
Mm.
So it might look like, hey, I've noticed that, and you give a very specific, factual based, no judgment related observation. Maybe somebody is struggling to get deadlines accomplished. Hey, I've noticed you've turned in really quality work. but it gets really tight to the deadline. And that's creating some ripple effects amongst the team's ability to do their work as well. Here's the question that you ask. What could I do to help you accomplish deadlines at an earlier rate?
Hmm.
Or how could I help you focus? What brings you the most energy? What brings you joy when you're working? What helps you accomplish things that you need to do? So you're asking really general questions, but still getting to the heart of maybe a symptom or a challenge that's associated with neurodivergence.
Yeah.
Um,
And honestly, they're all things that even if the person was completely neurotypical, is still a great question to ask. I feel like
Absolutely.
that's the case with a lot of accommodations. It's like even if there's no diagnosis or like technical, I feel like I don't want to use the term disorder, but I'm not sure what other like even if there's not necessarily something going on that makes them neurodivergent, I think all the accommodation stuff is still perfectly reasonable, like to provide. You're like,
Yeah.
hey, this helps you feel emotionally regulated. Hey, this helps you feel more productive. Like, we should do that for everybody.
Yeah. Think of these accommodations in the world that we maybe like don't think of immediately, like cut curves, like subtitles. Um, I grew up in a hard of hearing household. My mom was partially deaf, and she's got a cochlear implant now, and it's amazing. But that meant that we grew up having closed captions and subtitles on the TV. Today, I'm not hearing impaired, but like, holy mackerel, I can't watch TV without captions. It's
I can't watch without
it's so
subtitles.
hard, right?
Why would you
Um,
want to? I've like once in a while, I'll like somebody will be like, "Why do you have the subtitles on?" I'm like, "Do you not?
I don't too.
Why would you not want them on?"
But those are things that benefit everybody. You don't have to be hearing impaired to benefit from subtitles. You don't have to be somebody who is blind to benefit from cut curves, right? Think of bicyclists. Think of parents with strollers, right? They benefit from a cut curve. So um, those are the approaches to accommodations I try to encourage.
Cool, thank you. This has been a super fascinating conversation so far.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see.
I was so
I
I love
was
this
trying to,
question.
huh?
I love this question.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was wondering if we had like sort of already covered this, but yeah. So what's one accommodation that managers could implement tomorrow? No HR needed. So
You can ask those broad questions that we were talking about and accommodations that you don't necessarily need HR's approval for somebody to bring in noise canceling headphones or loops or something, right? Approval for somebody to have a lamp on their desk rather than the fluorescent lights, or
mm,
just to be in a more natural lit situation, like moving closer towards a window. Um, an accommodation could just be the permission to go into a quiet room when they have a call or need to focus. There are so many little things that we can do that we don't necessarily need to get HR involved in. A little caveat there. I do recommend for the neurodivergent person who is requesting the accommodation or has the need to maybe go through the formal process if they're comfortable and capable and feel, confident in doing so. Like if the organization is encouraging and willing to do so. Because if your manager changes, the next person may not be as willing to accommodate. And so you want to make sure that you've got formal documentation to support and protect you.
oh, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about
Yeah.
that. Um, and again, it's interesting to me where like you talk about like the fluorescent lights, which
Mhm.
like I used to, work in a traditional office, and that was always like the buzz and like the little like flickering and stuff. I'm always like, but when you talk about it, like everybody hates that. It's
Yeah.
just for if you're neurodiverse, maybe you like literally can't tolerate it. But everybody hates those already. But look at like, a movie like Office Space. They zoom in and like show and emphasize like, yeah, you're in this office and it's like a hellscape and you're listening to the buzz of the fluorescent lights and it's driving you insane. Like they'll emphasize that, showing it's clearly like that's a common theme. Everyone hates those lights. It's just like maybe someone like me or you, I'm like, I'm literally going to go insane if I have to listen to that buzzing.
Um,
Um,
Beta asked a really good question, if I can
oh,
jump in.
sure.
She asked who's responsible for the fee for accommodations in the States. I want to say it's the organization. Like if it's a work related accommodation, it should be the organization paying for it. And let's be honest, most accommodations are under, I know that they're under $300 most of the time. They're going to be like 50 to 100. So
I want to
it's,
say there's definitely at least like some kind of tax benefit of that. If not, like there
mm,
might be like some kind of a federal disability grant situation, but that's probably like something you have to apply for.
it might be.
Let's thanks for the question, Bane. I really
Yeah.
appreciate that. Let's see. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Uh so what is I feel like this is phrased in like a second person manner, but I think it's, I mean, it meant very generally. So, what is masking potentially costing your team, and do managers even know they're demanding it? So, this is talking about the hidden cost of not meeting people's accommodations that might be totally invisible to the manager. The manager's sitting there going, why isn't our productivity as high as I want it to be? And they don't realize how much they're making this neurodiverse person work suboptimally.
Right. Right. Masking is an incredibly exhausting experience, even if we don't know that we're doing it, because it can feel so natural. It's like imagine carrying a shield all your life. You
Mm-hmm.
may not know what it feels like to put the shield down. And so you're just used to the weight. And so you're comfortable with it. But the moment that you put the shield down, oh my God, look at I have an extra arm to do things. I feel so much lighter. I'm more managed, or I'm able to manage more. Um, think of a river, right? If we wanted to completely direct the full force of the river being your energy, your mental capacity towards something, but we have to divert part of the river just to cover our masking or our energy, we don't get the full force. So we lose productivity, we lose the impact, we lose um, capability. It impacts our emotional regulation when you're driving so much energy towards trying to cover yourself or present in a certain way, you are naturally more drained. The more drained you are, the harder it is to appropriately respond to things. So, yeah, you might have a shorter temper. You might be quicker to tears or frustration. I know that when I am dysregulated, if like my medication is off or anything, I am much closer to tears most of the time, to the point where I have to like let people know, like, this is okay. This is normal. Do not do not worry about what is going on my face. Um, I don't think managers understand that they're demanding it. I don't even know if they truly understand. And I don't mean this in a malicious way. I truly don't think that they've got insight into that experience. And so that they don't know what it's costing somebody. I'm doing a really cool project with one of my clients right now where we're doing neurodiversity listening sessions. And I get to meet with both neurodivergent and neurotypical individuals. And hearing the like I have to commend the neurotypical individuals I'm talking to, because the genuine curiosity and like wanting to do more and wanting to have insight and to support their neurodivergent team members is amazing. But it's also like shocking for me to hear like, oh, I never considered this, or like, oh, this was new to me, because I'm going, oh, well, of course, that makes perfect sense. If you didn't have insight into that experience, you wouldn't have known. And you probably wouldn't have asked for something knowing what it did to your team members.
Yeah, I will say also you mentioned I think you mentioned earlier on people like subconsciously masking or like not even realize they're consciously doing it. I like 100% before I like um had learned to self-identify as neurodivergent. I'm not formally diagnosed, but like I very clearly have ADHD and autism. But when I was younger, I had so internalized masking and like did not realize how much it was just wearing on my psyche and my mental health
Mhm.
all the time. Because when I like when I think I was like 17, I started working in like a heavily like blue collar field in the automotive industry, and so I was like dealing with a lot of like blue collar people and stuff where just like there was clear cultural expectations of just like how to be, and like it was like it was just more effective to communicate with people, like just to like get stuff done to like, and I was out in the country too, so like I didn't even realize I was doing it. I would be like code switching, like I'd walking into like some body shop out in the middle of the woods somewhere, and I'm immediately subconsciously switching to like, hey y'all, how you doing today? Like,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah. And you bring up a really good point. Like, imagine I'm speaking admittedly right from a white perspective. Imagine being a person of color who is also neurodivergent, who has to navigate so many other cultural and social norms, right? Imagine how exhausting that must be.
oh, absolutely. And I think that would probably contributes to that. I believe there are higher rates of certain types of neurodiversity in certain ethnic groups, I guess would be the right term. Uh, is that correct? Or do you know anything about that? I don't
Well,
want
so there's certainly,
to.
when you think about it, I don't want to speak for somebody's experience, but to encapsulate or to try to build a bridge here, like imagine being somebody of color who is already dealing with like societal expectations or challenges or stereotypes, and then you finding out or maybe self-identifying that you're ADHD, you may not want to go and get a formal diagnosis or talk about it because you're already dealing with such stereotypes. So we may see lower rates of diagnosis in different groups because of the cultural
Hmm.
um, expectations and challenges that they already have to navigate.
Also for like
Um,
economic reasons, because it's like, can you afford to go
yeah.
to the psychologist or whatever?
Do you have
Um, oh,
access?
by the way, actually, just for anyone who's watching this later um, who might be like a manager who's neurotypical and like not really super well versed in that, could we define what masking is real quick?
You know what? Great question. I probably should have started there. Masking is exactly what it sounds, and at the same time, not. It is performing in a way that appears as neurotypical or appears as normal within the cultural group that you're within. So that involves making eye contact, maybe when you don't feel comfortable. It involves maybe your tone of voice or the way that you speak or the tones that you use, trying to match somebody's level of excitement. Um, it may look like toning one's energy down, or like if you are an individual with the hyperactive element of ADHD physically, right, it might look like forcing yourself to stand stock still to look like you're focusing in reality when it would be easier to sway or to move. Hiding fidgeting, it's hiding any element of your neurodivergentness and in turn expending more energy to look quote unquote normal.
Yeah, and it can require so much energy. It's like it sounds silly. It's like it requires more energy to sit still, but like I totally
Yeah.
get that. Like I have to make sure there's not like too many like extra objects on my desk when I'm like in a meeting or something because I will like sit and fidget with something.
Yeah.
Um, let's go ahead and move on to the next question. We've got about 10 minutes left in the session as a heads up.
Perfect.
Um, oops, hold on, I switched to the wrong tab. How do you move from individual accommodations to redesigning the whole system? I feel like that's kind of a big question, but I feel like you'll have a cool answer.
It's a big question, but it's a good one. From moving from individual accommodations to redesigning the whole system, you first have to start with access. Are you removing barriers, not challenges, to people being able to have psychological safety, feeling comfortable to speak up, accessing accommodations? Like, first, you have to open the doors.
Remove the
And
stigma.
yeah, removing the stigma. You have to open those doors in order for the information to flow in. Once you've been able to take in the information and understand, okay, what's going on? What are we seeing? What patterns? What data? Then you can take a look at your system as a whole. System as a whole might look like talking about the lighting, talking about the soundproofing, talking about even the temperature in your office. Um, I mean, that's a whole other conversation. I could spend a whole hour talking about like the appropriate temperature in an office. But you really have to start first by hearing the population around you and within the organization to understand what's going on first and foremost. Um, and then removing those specific barriers. It's a complex process. It's one that's going to have a lot of ebb and flow, push back and pull, right? Somebody might say, I have no problem with the fluorescent lighting. I don't understand why we're putting lamps on everybody's table. Well, it's for the good of the majority as well. Like it's actually going to benefit you. And if you like a fluorescent light, let's meet you where you're at. But it is an ask the group instead of ask the person, ask the group, right? Take in that data as a whole. But you have to open the doors for it first and foremost.
Yeah, I think it's largely about it's about like trust, comfort,
Yeah.
communication. Um, I think a lot of like questions, like if you're looking at this from like a leader perspective, I think um, as a leader, a huge amount of like things you can do to be a better leader are all about communication
Hmm.
and like giving people that sense of trust and comfort, especially when it comes to this, because as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people who are neurodiverse who have rejection sensitive dysphoria or have this like internalized sense of shame
Hmm.
just from like growing up and being told they're not enough or they need to do better, they need to work harder, they need to focus more, etc. Like a lot of people kind of have a trauma and like a self-worth issues attached to that. So navigating that in order to make people feel comfortable to speak up about those issues can be the biggest challenge in accommodating someone.
You've got it on the head.
Will, do you have any input on that? I feel like this is the type of question that you would enjoy.
I do, but I just want to leave time for the question too that we had come through. So maybe I'll add my thoughts here in a moment. But there was a question that came through in the chat.
Oh, sorry, I didn't notice that.
It
Yeah,
just it just
so
came through. Yeah, all good.
Dana says in the chat, what is the ADHD and autism pathway there, and is it extremely expensive? She says the private sector here, I believe in the UK, is very expensive, and the NHS is 7+ waiting years for neurodiverse support. Wow, that's really rough.
Yeah.
Samantha, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, so the pathway that I typically recommend is I recommend somebody make an appointment with their general practitioner or their PCP, like whoever your main doctor is that you would go to for a physical or a checkup. And then I was actually having this conversation just the other day, and that you bring a list, like you do a little research ahead of time and really know yourself well to be able to bring a list of, hey, this is what I'm experiencing, these are my challenges, this is the situations that I'm running into. But you go to your general practitioner first, and then ideally they make a recommendation for a psychiatrist to go through the experience, to go through the diagnosis experience, forgive me. Yes, it can be expensive. Um, I hesitate or I shudder to think what I paid to go through the process. It wasn't terrible, but it was like more than I certainly anticipated. Um, but if you find the right provider, there's a lot of like private providers, at least here in Cincinnati, that you can go to. It can take a couple months though, still. Like we are still seeing, I think, a little bit of a backlog in some areas of trying to get in for diagnoses. So, um,
Well, also there's also like as somebody who grew up out in the country, um, if I had like so where I grew up, we had to drive like half an hour to get to the grocery store.
oh my
So,
gosh.
I struggle to think if I had even like wanted to get diagnosed as a kid or whatever, I would have had to convince one of my parents to drive me like, I don't know, at least 45 minutes. Like there
Ugh,
was the only thing in my actual town was like a just totally regular doctor. Like there was not any kind of specialist of anything. You were driving like an hour for that.
hmm.
So that'd be
Right.
another further barrier in addition to the like kind of cultural shame and stigma and all that and the cost.
Yeah. I know that there are providers that are trying to do it virtually. I know that I had to go in person because there was like an element of a focus test that I had to do that I clearly did not do well on. But yeah, it's difficult to navigate, I think, for some folks.
Hmm. Good question. Thank you, Bana.
Yeah, thanks, Bina.
I like this question a lot. What is broken about traditional performance management for ND employees? And I want to chime in on this as well, actually, because I think with a lot of this accommodation stuff, it's like it's awesome that we're talking about like giving accommodations to people who need it, but it also kind of makes me go like, why why can't we provide those accommodations for like everybody? Like, does it have to be like a life-ending problem for you to be given a more comfortable environment?
No, it doesn't. That's the beauty of it, right? Is that if you've got a manager who's engaged and understands their people, then you can meet them where they're at and create a more comfortable experience for them. Obviously, not we're going to work. Not everything's going to be like soft, cushiony pillows, but it's still going to be, at least a little bit better. But when we talk about traditional performance management, I think it means not only moving the goalposts for people, but creating different goalposts. So looking for, I'm not going to get too deep into a sports metaphor because I'm going to mess it up.
I
But
do that all the time. I feel like I'm gonna make a sports metaphor. Wait, I don't know anything about sports. Shit.
yeah, no, I'm going to just end up naming different color goalposts rather than like, do you need a field goal versus a soccer goal? Right, very, very different. We have to look at like progress and change differently for each individual. So performance management is somebody is meeting their goals at a regular pace. Are their goals going to be different? It's so tempting to do like a one size fits all kind of performance management. Like, hey, are you achieving X percentage of sales? Are you bringing in referrals? Like, those are great, but it needs to be more customized to like, what were your goals this year? What were your points of check-in? What did you want to accomplish? What were you struggling with? How did we meet that? I mean, that's the traditional performance management is just not doing it today.
Mm. I think honestly, and this kind of goes back to what I was saying before, but I feel like the thing is that when you introduce a neurodiverse people into these traditional systems, it really just highlights how they're already broken. Because
Yeah.
like a well-functioning system would already make accommodations for the fact that we're humans. Like you might not be in a good mood someday. The lights might be bothering you. Like it just highlights how like a lot of our like traditional work structures and environments and stuff are already suboptimal for everybody and are probably decreasing everybody's productivity and hurting everybody's mental health. It's just that it's for neurodiverse people, you just might not be able to cope with it. But like everyone else is walking around on some level, like masking or just kind of like soaking the damage from, sorry, that was a video game term. Just putting up with the damage from this just constant low level like irritation of just being in a system that wants you to be a robot when
Right.
you're a human.
There's a reason why they call the neurodivergent community the canary in the coal mine. It's because we are more sensitive and more aware of inefficient systems, challenges, issues that are going on, and essentially because we are just more sensitive to toxic situations, we're going to be the ones that raise our hand earlier. And so it's important to listen to your neurodivergent people because they're going to be waving the flag,
That's a really
letting
good
people
point.
know.
We're also less inclined to just be like, oh, this is fine. Everybody else seems fine, so this is probably fine, right? I'm just not going to say anything. I don't want people to think I'm a complainer or whatever.
Yeah,
Like we might,
yeah,
we might be more inclined to like not read the room and just be like, this is dumb.
yeah, yeah. It's true.
If there's no other thoughts, we can go on to the last question. We're kind of technically we're closing out at 11:45, but we can just wrap up here. So last question, very general question. What's the one mindset that changes everything?
That neurodivergent people are not broken, that they are different, and different is beneficial and good. Different is what brings diversity and meaning and contrast and color to our world. Um,
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I could go on all day about that. I'm actually going to leave it there because I think the simpler the statement, the less diluted the meaning gets. So
Yeah,
I'll leave it there.
absolutely. Kind of like I was saying at the beginning, where I mean, I firmly believe that all of the things that change the world and like all these like world-changing inventions and everything come from neurodiverse people. How could they have come from neurotypical people? By definition, they think more. They think like more linearly and more. Well, sorry, I don't want to sound like I'm like being negative about neurotypical people, but it's just like by definition we think different, so we come up with the things that are different, right? Like it makes
Yeah.
sense to me. You think Nikola Tesla was neurotypical?
Oh, possibly.
Maybe Edison was, but I digress. So that is the end of this session. I feel like we had a really great conversation. Loved that.
Yeah.
So feel free to follow me on LinkedIn. I have a QR code here if anyone wants to snag that to join our mailing list for this series and some of our other events and stuff. You can check out my company, Mountaineer Studio, at mountaineer.tech. And this series is also brought to you by Gluno and Quantum Foam Studios. Any last thoughts before we end the session?
No, I so appreciate you. Do you mind if I drop my LinkedIn in the chat
Oh, yeah,
just in case
totally.
anybody would like to connect?
Yeah.
No, thank you for your
Yes.
thought-provoking and interesting questions. This has been great. So thank you, thank you.
Do you have a website? I feel
Thank
like
you.
I should have put that on
Yeah,
the slide, but
I'll drop that in the chat.
so it's beyondnd.com
Yeah.
for those who are viewers. Shoot, I really should have gotten that link from you to add to the slide deck, but oh well. But yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Thank you, Samantha. And that's all for today.